Ah, yes indeed, the beautiful sandy shores of Agaria, a small ocean planet with a dwarf-sized desert continent in the outer rim of the galaxy, an ample place for piracy and mercenaries, as well as bounty hunters. The name is Orzo, and I am a veteran of the Shattered Empire. You see, I am technically 652 years old because quite a while ago I went into cryosleep when the planet's atmosphere was failing with many other Shattered Empire soldiers, only to awaken to a new government. The Federation, much like the Shattered Empire of old, except much, much more cruel. They also have a deep-seated hatred for the old Empire and any of the old Imperial soldiers, i.e. why they hate us. Yes, indeed, it's not exactly the most lavish life we could be living here on this desolate desert planet, but it is quite beautiful. I must say though, even though I love the beauty of the shores, I much rather prefer the hustle and bustle of the cities. Now you do have to be quite careful in these cities as there is danger lurking around every corner with as many pirates, bandits, looters, and God knows what else in these cities and on this planet quite frankly. But you can always find a fine place to wet your whistle. Agaria is chock full of bars, but bars like these are few and far between. For you see, this bar is owned and operated by a bunch of Imperial veterans just like myself. Most of the time it's just a great place to sit around, play some billiards and chit-chat a bit, and perhaps even get drunk, slap off your arse on some exotic rum. But it is also the perfect place for us to go about hearing some chit-chat about new warrants and possible bounty targets in the system. We hunters tend to stick together and share info when necessary. Speaking of which, it would seem that I have my very first target wanted for kidnapping and also worth 1,250 silver. Now the easy part, tracking him down. It would seem that he's fled to a nearby city controlled by the pirate organization known as the Torturous Marauders. It was the perfect environment for an assassination attempt. With how rainy it is and how dark it is, visibility is sure to be extremely low, and though this might hinder our shooting, it also means that they'll never see us sneaking up. Although I think they have their hands tied as it is anyhow, it would appear that the Marauders and some Junkers are in something of a clash at the moment. Battling in war caskets like this, we could feel the shake in the ground with every hit. Then all of a sudden, in the distance, out of a building walked our target. The hunt is on. I rush behind a pillar of wood, taking aim off of it with my hand up against it, managing to get a lucky shot in at him. He would flee behind his own pillar of stone, and a shootout would ensue between the two of us. He may have been wearing heavy marine armor, but lucky enough for me, his militia rifle was very inaccurate, most likely due to poor quality and also cleaning methods. Because of the inaccuracies of his weapon, I decided it would be a safe bet to rush him. I ran up to the same stone pillar and shot him in the head. Now with him dead, he's not going to be missing that horrible rifle and his combat knife, or even the survival meals, I'm sure. And we just made an easy 1,200 buckaroos. Now with some starting cash in hand, I thought it might be a good idea for us to go ahead and set up our very own base of operations. Traveling directly north of the pirate city, we would encounter some small mountains, which I thought would be an ample place for our home, at least for the time being. Now it was time for us to unload our riches and what few meals we had brought with us. However, given the devious, malicious, thieving nature of most folks on this planet, it's not going to be very safe leaving our money out like this, and if we don't eat those meals quick, animals will surely get them, so we need to begin working on a proper home. We were right next to an extremely small little hill, and I thought to myself, instead of going about building some wooden canopies or a small little house outside of a hill, why don't we hollow it out on the inside, and that way we'll be a bit safer, and it'll also be harder for people to discover that this is where we're staying. Collecting some wood from the area, we could also go about putting some proper flooring and also a few bits and bobs of furniture in as well. The perfect bounty hunter hideout. And although I will admit the conditions were a little bit cramped to say the least, I can't tell you how good it feels to be sleeping in a proper bed once more, even if I feel like the walls are going to collapse at any moment. For the rest of our time in this area, we actually began exploring a little bit and deconstructing some ruins that we found in this region, as we could use the resources like steel. But we had also found very large piles of calcified junk. It's not uncommon for the Federation to use places like this as their dumping ground for the waste from their ships. But something interesting is that if you dig this calcified junk, you can sometimes find some very useful items. For example, I managed to find several plasma cartridges, many different life support packs and med kits, and many other things. Not only could we use these items and resources to our advantage, but if the time calls for it, we could also sell them to try to upgrade our gear. Speaking of which, we have our very next bounty target. We may not even need to sell anything if we can continue getting some pretty steady work. It appears to be an Ungoy who had deserted their chapter of the Covenant and joined up with the Federation. He's not worth all that much, but at the moment he appears to be the only humanoid target that we have. We had heard whispers and rumblings that he was just due south in some little desert hills at an outpost, so of course we began to track him down. However, after arriving, one thing was apparent. It looks like we didn't get all the info because the Ungoy was not alone. A Federalist Sangheili. This fella is no doubt going to be extremely dangerous. Sangheili are much stronger and much faster than humans. I'm not exactly sure what type of union these two have together, but one thing is for sure, this hunt is not going to be near as easy as we hoped. I immediately took cover behind some rocks, taking aim with the iron sights of my bolt-action rifle, firing at the Ungoy, but managing to hit the Sangheili as well. Uh-oh, that wasn't supposed to happen. You see, the issue is we were supposed to bring him in alive, and now he's dead. Not only that, but we have a very pissed off Federalist Sangheili who just watched us kill his comrade. I decided that I wanted to try to get in a bit more close, and then eventually I thought it could be a good idea if we tried to bust open the building to hide inside to ambush the Sangheili, but he started firing at me. With no other option, I would be forced to flee the area, and thankfully I would be able to do so with my life. Well, it would seem that that mission was a complete failure, and we're not going to be making any money today. I think that this may have something to do with the fact that my bolt-action rifle couldn't even begin to put a scratch in the Sangheili's Federation armor. Perhaps we should go about upgrading our gear, I said to myself in my head, and of course I agreed. We immediately went back home, picked up many of the items that we got from our junk piles, and went off to some nearby Outlanders to sell it. It was during this time that we would also attempt to purchase ourselves a better rifle as well as some apparel. And as you can see, I think we did a pretty fair job. Now this charge rifle should do much better than our pathetic bolt-action rifle, although I couldn't really find all that much armor. Hopefully this hood will at least give us a little bit of protection for the old dome. Although maneuvering should be much easier, as we also managed to purchase a salvage Covenant jump pack for those situations where we need to move around in a hurry. Now that we've upgraded all the armor, weapons, and everything else on our person, I thought that it might be quite fitting and very crucial for us to go about upgrading our hideout. Specifically with some actual electricity, but also a few new bear traps, spike traps, some barricades made of duracrete for us to hide behind for cover, and also a military-grade turret that will protect the base while we're out on our missions. And by the time we were finished, I was much happier with how this was compared to previously, and it was still quite discreet except for the large solar panel sticking out the side, but we'll deal with that later. Now then, moving on, it is time for our next hunt. It would appear that we're going to have to hunt down some type of abomination, an archopanda, an amalgamation of machine and creature. Unfortunately, this is really our only choice as we don't currently have any humanoid subjects to hunt at the moment. Now, I'm not one for hunting down innocent animals without good reason, so I find it important that you people know the reason that this panda has a bounty on its head is because it's been sneaking around some of the local sand people villages and eating their babies. Yes, they're babies. Sick little freak, isn't he? We snuck up between a small little valley in the hills and began taking fire at it with our rifle. The only problem was this malfunctioning monster was on the run. As we fired at it, it was attempting to escape the region, and if that happened, we might not be able to track it down again so easily, so we had to do something to stop it. Using my jump pack, I managed to keep up with the creature and get close enough to give it a good little poke in the old ribs with a bayonet on the end of my charge rifle. Then and only then did it finally begin to attack me back, keeping it from running away. It would begin chasing after me for a hot moment, but as it would do so, I continued firing at it and eventually it would have to give in to its injuries. Sorry about this, old girl, but even on a planet full of murderers, thieves, and the lowest of the low, eating babies still ain't cool. Ah, you smell that? That's the smell of panda burgers and plenty of silver in our future. With all of our newfound riches, I thought that I might go out and purchase yet another weapon, one that is slightly different than our charge rifle. This is an anti-material rifle, and it packs one hell of a punch. You see, this type of rifle specializes in a piercing damage compared to our charge rifle's heat-based damage. That way, if we have a target with a different type of armor. Ah yes, I see a soft, squishy target now that this rifle would be absolutely perfect for. A powerful weapon like this is extremely useful and of course extremely intimidating, and it really makes our hunts a little bit of a cakewalk, turning our targets into Swiss cheese. And thus earning us a lot of smackaroonies. After a few more hunts and selling a bit more bits and bobs that we found in the large calcified trash piles, we were able to buy ourselves a nice helmet to go with the rest of our not exactly up to par armor. But all our hard work appears to have attracted the attention of the Federation, and they have dispatched an assassin along with his lady's servant to try and kill us. Ah yes, a hunter versus a hunter. As we rush to cover behind our Duracrete barriers, they were forced to try to take whatever cover they could behind some rock chunks out in the sands, leading to the death of the servant. But as for the assassin, he was still at large, hiding like a shadow in those chunks. We were firing aimlessly into the dunes, hoping, praying even, that we would hit him. It was during this time, though, that I realized that our charge rifle would be much better to take him down, and thus I used my jump pack to get behind him, fire, and kill him. Ah, well that sure was kind of them to bring me some dinner for this evening. Now, with the imminent threat neutralized, I thought it might be a good idea if we went through and spruced up our base a little bit. This isn't some type of tavern or cabin. For God's sake, I'm a bounty hunter out in the rim of space. We need something more appropriate. So I started off with some layered, beautiful metal flooring. I also think that the base could use a little bit of an expansion for a storage room. That way we're not keeping all of our junk in the same place that we're doing business and also eating and sleeping, of course. And by the end of it, I was pretty happy with how it turned out. Much less discreet than it was before, but I think that we have the military means now for ourselves to protect ourselves properly. You'll also notice that I encased our solar panel to ensure that it doesn't get damaged during raids. I also built myself a computer system that is linked to the Hunter's Warrant network. That way it should be quite easy for us to go about picking out our next targets right here in the comfort of our own home. But if you thought that was something, you're really going to be impressed with the next move that we make, baby, as we are deconstructing some spaceship chunks as well as mining out components and steel from the nearby hills here, as well well as smelting down steel chunks, but more importantly plasteel chunks from all the calcified junk piles that we've been mining. And the reason that we're collecting and stockpiling all these resources is we, out of junk, salvage, and some purchased parts, I must admit, with all of our hunting earnings, are going to be building our very own ship. Not only will it operate as a mobile home, but it will also make it much easier to travel in between our bounty targets. Although I must admit it is going to take an extremely long amount of time to finish. Plus, we don't currently have enough resources to finish it, so let's move on to our next target. A Jerohani that is wanted for loitering with a very large bounty on his head for some reason. Something tells me that he may have a few other warrants for something less non-violent. With a small, inconspicuous hideout like this, I can see why he hasn't been caught just yet, but as the rain begins to pour and skew their visibility, as we always like when we attack, we could see that he was not alone. A waster pirate companion, either from or rebelling against the torturous marauders. Either way, I don't think she'll be much trouble. With his companion dead, the target would attempt to flee the area while firing at us, but thanks to my jump pack, that wouldn't be so easy for him to achieve. As the coward continued to try to flee the region, I continued to give chase, shooting at him all the while he was sloshing in the mud before I ended up finishing him off. Another rainy day, another rainy dollar, baby. Think I'll buy myself something nice this time around. And boy, did I ever. Unfortunately, none of the Outlanders or pirates were selling any Mandalorian armor to go along with my helmet, but I ended up getting the next best thing, some commando power armor with a very similar color. Now, hopefully with this type of protection, I won't have to worry about using so many damn med packs all the time for my injuries. Now that we're armed and armored to the teeth, it's time for us to finish up our ship. We're just working on the internal portions at the moment, like the ship's capacitor to store power, as well as the sensors and the drone core, and also the life support systems to keep us alive in case something happens and we need to take our helmet off up there. We don't want anything to go wrong once we achieve orbit, not only because, well, we'll die, but as you can see, all the money that we've made has been spent in purchasing advanced components and a few other things that we needed for the ship. But with that, my friends, I think it is time for us to go above and beyond, if you know what I mean. We're no longer just your standard bounty hunter. We're going pro to the big leagues, baby. I haven't seen the planet from this angle since I had been promoted in the Imperial forces, learning on the station how to wear some cataphract armor. Those were the days. She may not be quite as lush as I remember, with plenty of vegetation and green grass, but she's still just as beautiful. From this angle, we'll have access to every single warrant in the entire network for the entire planet, meaning that we have a much bigger clientele all of a sudden. I believe we just became a global businessman with a chance of becoming interplanetary very shortly. Now then, I suppose it's time for us to get back to work, going down the list of potential money bags. I mean, targets, that is. Full speed ahead, baby. We are coming down. We would be able to easily land anywhere we chose, in this particular case, right in their own backyard. This particular target had something of a bodyguard companion, so I whipped out the old combat knife and gutted him like a fish. With him out of the way, the only other person here was the bounty, and after a few blasts to the old noggin from the charge rifle, they would die too. I must say though, there is a little bit of an issue. We do still have to get this target to a nearby settlement to collect our warrant reward, and the only way to do so right now would be to try to fly back into orbit and then down, and then you get the gist. So that's going to be quite impractical. Instead, we would end up deconstructing many of the electronics and mechanical components around this little hideout, and we would actually utilize those to go about making some very special parts. Say hello to our jet bike. We ended up giving it a more appropriate paint job that fits our armor. Think of it like a land speeder, only much cheaper. As you can see, the jet bike isn't exactly that large of a vehicle, but that's actually exactly what we want, as we only need just enough room for us, the driver, as well as the corpse of our bounty. Not only is this more practical, but it is much more efficient as well, because the ship takes a lot of fuel going back and forth to orbit. Unfortunately, we can't just cruise around in atmosphere, as it's not really designed for that. Speaking of the ship though, it's time for us to go about making some improvements and expanding it a bit on the front, as we need a place to put our new vehicle, of course. You can consider this something of a hangar bay, even though it is going to be a land vehicle in there. We're just going to be using a garage door made of steel, so it's nice and airtight once we're back in outer space, and also we're just going to use it for some storage. We would end up flying back into orbit though to scout out our next targets, but before we do so, we do need something of a little bit of a nap. Even bounty hunters like myself have to rest from time to time, and a bit of meditation never hurts to clear the mind and put us at ease before a hunt. Cleaning up the planet of crime one step at a time. Some targets were much easier than others, as they didn't really have any weapons or armor. In this case, just no armor. As you can see, we actually got ourselves a pretty sweet plasma rifle. This energy-based weapon is extremely powerful, and that's exactly why we didn't waste any time stabbing its owner to death. We couldn't take any chances of getting shot with it. After entering one of the buildings, we also found plenty of quality hats that we could sell, as well as some gold bars. Off we go to collect more trash. Not all of our targets instantly died after being shot with our new weapon. Some of them hit the ground, like this little Ungoy here, who immediately began begging for his life and pleading. He even offered to join us as a bounty hunter's assistant. Now, normally, something like this, we would just shoot them in the face, but in this particular situation, because he is an Ungoy and they are quite obedient, we actually decided to accept and begin tending to his wounds. We would still need to recruit him, of course, with a little bit of conversation to ensure that he truly is going to join us and not try to double-cross us and stab us in the back. Luckily, though, his threshold to be recruited was very low, and after some time, we had a brand new companion. Looks like we're going to need to test his strategic skills and also battle prowess. We should also probably teach him how to fly the ship in case we get into a hairy situation. Something we wouldn't have to teach him, though, is how to fight, and that's why on our very next mission, we didn't have to worry about him at all. Yes, indeed, Leg the Ungoy could truly hold his own. With a set of crucible pistols, he could do quite a bit of damage. It was also during this particular mission that his crucible pistols, which are not exactly lethal at all times, came in quite handy, as the target was downed instead of being killed. Funny enough, we would actually begin tending to her wounds. Normally, this isn't something we would worry about, and we would simply step over her and shoot her in the head and then take her corpse in for the reward, but since there are two of us, there's less likely of a chance for anything to go wrong, and we will get a significant boost in our reward. As for her companion, though, he could be shot in the head and we wouldn't even think about it. As I was taking the bounty in for our reward, I would leave Leg behind to go about his, well, whatever he's doing. It appears that he's fabricating some type of parts. For the next few days, we would let Leg go about building himself a small little workshop, I suppose you could call it, fabricating more parts and also purchasing some things like advanced components from the nearby Outlanders. And when it was all said and done, he appears to have his very own set of armor. It makes sense, since his species is extremely small and fragile during battles, that he would want to protect himself, and I think that this mech suit is going to do just that. But as you can also see in this demonstration, it will be extremely useful during battles on missions to hunt down targets, although maybe it is a little bit overkill for that. Thankfully, we had just enough, and I do mean just enough room in our hangar bay for the mech and the jet bike both. Phew, that sure was a lot of work. It takes it out of a fella, I'll tell ya. Before we go on our next mission, we definitely need to get a little bit of rest, especially because our next target is not going to be all that easy. Going by the name of Harmony, the torturous marauders' top man, well, one of their top men, is wanted for piracy and worth about 10,000 silver. Make no mistake, my friends, this is unlike any of our other previous bounty targets with the pirates. Harmony here, no doubt, has a large arsenal of weaponry, armor, and even augmentations to their body. We were able to detect his location and immediately began coming down from the heavens and landing near this little base. We're quite unsure as to what he's doing here, as he is the top brass for the pirates, but my best guess is that he's been designated to this world to ensure that it has a very large pirate influence. But one thing we do know for sure, he is definitely here, and based on that rocket launcher, he's not messing around. These pirates also appear to have their very own brand of mechanoids. With a spider-like design wielding a large gun on top, it might even manage to give Leg a run for his money in his mech suit. But I suppose we'll have to see. Cautiously, or as cautiously as we could, we began to enter their little settlement here, taking out their defenses as well as making room by destroying their solar panel for our mech to get a good view of them. But all hell was about to break loose. The destructive power of their mechanoids was unmatched. We would have to create several shield barriers to try and stop their explosive power while firing at them and hitting them with every rocket barrage that we possibly could. And even after all that and blowing up half of this entire damn place, their mechs still barely had a scratch on them. Nevertheless, we would not give up, and the ferocious fight would continue to rage. Leg would draw their fire in the mech as Orzo began to take cover behind the shield barriers and buildings when necessary to fire at the enemies. At one point, even getting a direct shot off at Harmony himself. Finally, with one of these theropod mechs down, there was only one more to go, and we too would kill it. But the shields of our own mech was completely broken, and the armor was beginning to fail. As we were returning fire on the absolute Hail Mary of bullets that the pirates were hitting us with, eventually they would attempt to flee. As the other pirates would attempt to flee the area, this was an ample opportunity for us to hunt down Harmony one-on-one. We engaged him in hand-to-hand combat, but unfortunately his sword ended up putting Orzo on the ground, severely injured. Thankfully, Leg was in hot pursuit with the mech suit, firing with the large mech rifle as well as a rocket barrage, finally putting Harmony on his ass. That's right, you son of a bitch. I hope you like pain. There's plenty more where that came from. Leg would begin tending to Orzo's wounds to ensure that he didn't bleed to death, during which time Orzo would actually regain the strength to walk. And with that, finally, justice shall be served. We respect you, pirate, for you have been the toughest hunt yet. But now I shall put you down like the dog that you are. Well, Leg's old buddy, old pal, it looks like we managed to do it somehow. And once we get his body cashed in, we will make a fortune. It must be said, though, that this hunt has cost me more than just time. My body took quite a toll during battle, losing my right eye, my right arm, and even my left leg. So is the life of a bounty hunter. We knew the risk, and the reward is still all that much sweeter. Besides, we can replace them with bionics once we find some. But until then, my friends, I shall continue hunting, and I shall see you next time.